The wind cut across the parade ground as Captain Ethan Cole stood in dress blues on the reviewing stand, teeth clenched, watching an old man in a red flannel shirt walk alone across the concrete with a paper visitor badge swinging on his chest, looking like he'd taken a wrong turn into the wrong world. Rows of soldiers stood at attention, flags snapped, the band still buzzing from the anthem, and Ethan's brain kept drifting back to the gunnery drills his tank company was missing, so they could clap for what the base commander had called a brief community recognition event. Behind him, a lieutenant snickered, "Sir, somebody's grandpa lost the PX." And another answered, "Maybe he's here to fix the snack bar." And a thin ripple of laughter ran through the officers' row, small but ugly, making Ethan's jaw tighten. He hated ceremonies, but he hated that sound more. The sergeant major hit the mic, voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Jack Rourke, veteran of armored operations overseas." And the applause that followed was light and automatic, more habit than respect, while the old man just gave a tiny nod and kept his shoulders square like a man who'd spent a lifetime refusing to hunch. As Rourke reached the front, Ethan saw more details. The long, pale scar running from behind his ear into his collar, the faded tank patch tattooed on one wrist, the way his eyes scanned the field and the buildings and the exits on instinct, not curiosity. The colonel leaned toward Ethan and murmured, "When I call you down, you shake his hand. Ask a safe question. Make it look like we care about the old guard. Smile for the cameras." Ethan gave a tight nod, already rehearsing something bland about, "Thank you for your service," thinking this would be over in 2 minutes. Then the colonel turned back to the microphone and said, "Captain Cole, front and center," in a tone that said this next part had been scripted without him. Ethan marched down off the stand, boots ringing on the steps, feeling hundreds of eyes follow him as he stopped in front of the old man. The colonel smiled into the mic. "Captain Cole commands Hammer Company, 2nd Battalion," he announced. He had one simple question he wanted to ask you himself. Ethan hadn't been warned about any question, but the crowd waited, phones up, so he took the mic and decided to keep it easy. "Sir," he said, forcing his voice steady as he looked Rourke in the eye. "With respect, what was your call sign back when you served?" For a heartbeat, the old man didn't answer, just watched him like he was studying the inside of Ethan's skull. Then he leaned closer to the microphone and spoke in a calm, almost tired voice that carried across the whole field. "They called me Hammer 6. The air changed in an instant. Somewhere behind Ethan, a senior NCO sucked in a breath. A warrant officer whispered, "No way," under his breath. One of the older tankers down the line straightened, like someone had yanked a string through his spine. Ethan felt his own chest tighten, because he knew that name. Every young armor officer did. Hammer 6 was the ghost story of Doctrine Class, the anonymous battalion commander who, during the Gulf War, had grabbed his radio, overrode a higher-ranking officer, turned his tanks off the neat highway plan, and smashed through ambush after ambush to open a corridor for trapped convoys that would otherwise have been shredded in an artillery kill zone. Officially, the battle got a few cool sentences in a dry slide deck. Unofficially, it was the night instructors leaned forward and said, "This is what mission command looks like when it costs something." Ethan had assumed the man behind the call sign was long dead. Now he stood 3 feet away in a red flannel shirt, visitor badge flapping in the wind. Ethan's rehearsed line died in his throat. Without deciding to, he snapped to attention and threw a salute that was sharper than anything he'd given all morning. "Sir," he said, voice rough, "my company trains on your highway fight. We never knew the name behind Hammer 6. Rourke's eyes softened a fraction as he returned the salute, rusty but exact. "Names don't matter much," he said quietly. "The decisions do." The colonel stepped in, smile a little strained now. "Well, Mr. Rourke, we're honored to have you share a few inspiring words with the battalion," he began. But Rourke looked past him at Ethan instead. "Your unit carries the Hammer call sign?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Ethan answered. "Hammer Company." "Then you're the one I came for," the old man said, and just like that, the ceremony script broke in half. Ethan blinked. "You came for me?" "One of your staff sergeants sent a note to the vet's home with that flyer your public affairs office mailed out," Rourke said, not bothering to hide it from the mic. "Said his captain trained hard, took care of his people, but swallowed his doubts in staff meetings when Hire pushed plans that felt wrong. Asked if I'd talk about what silence cost us before anyone called me anything." The words hit Ethan like a punch. He knew exactly which sergeant had written that note, and for a hot second anger flared, but it burned right into shame because the man hadn't lied. He remembered briefings where he'd kept his mouth shut, telling himself someone up the chain had a wider picture even while his gut clawed at him. The colonel's jaw tightened, clearly unhappy that this was turning into something he hadn't scripted. "Mr. Rourke, with respect, this isn't the best venue to—" he started, but Rourke finally turned to face him fully, and something cold and hard slid into the old man's eyes. "Colonel, you brought every soldier on this base out here to clap at words like courage and sacrifice," he said, his voice suddenly sharper, carrying across the speakers. "Seems like the right venue to mention the part you're leaving out." The formation went still. Ethan could feel the tension climb. Officers wondering if they were allowed to agree. Enlisted soldiers wondering what was about to break. Ethan made a choice. He offered the microphone back to Rourke, letting everyone see it. "Please, sir," he said, "tell us." The old man took the mic with both hands, knuckles pale, and didn't move from his spot. "You know the legend of Hammer 6, he began. "You've heard the part where we held a highway and got a citation. You probably haven't heard the part where we helped build the trap that almost killed us." The wind dropped, as if it, too, wanted to listen. Rourke's tone stayed even, but each sentence cut clean. He described stacked vehicles nose to tail on an open road because a major liked neat formations more than covered positions. How 3 officers, including himself, had noticed the terrain made them a perfect artillery target. How each had thought, "I'll bring it up later," and then let the briefing move on because nobody wanted to be the guy who slowed the meeting or challenged the plan. "Rounds started landing exactly where any idiot could have guessed," he said flatly. "Command net went quiet. Everyone waited for someone bigger to fix it. Men died polite." He paused just long enough for the words to sink in. "When I grabbed that mic and told my battalion to turn off the highway and punch through the flank, they later called it courage," he continued. "Truth is, I was terrified. Not of dying. You signed for that early. I was terrified I'd watch my people die because I'd kept my mouth shut when there was still time to change the plan." He looked out over the ranks of young faces, some wide-eyed, some already marked by things they didn't talk about at home. "You like the story where Hammer 6 saved the day," he said. "Fine, but don't forget the part where Hammer 6 almost helped kill them by going along with stupid in silence." Ethan felt those words land inside his chest and lodge there like shrapnel. He remembered a recent rehearsal where he'd argued against a narrow wadi route in private, then gone quiet when the brigade commander brushed off his concern in front of the room. He pictured that wadi full of his tanks, artillery walking down the line, and bile rose in his throat. Rourke's gaze locked onto him. "Your soldiers trust you, Captain," the old man said. "I watched them move on the range this morning. They'd follow you into anything. That's the dangerous part. When Hire hands you a bad idea, they're not following those other ranks. They're following you." Ethan swallowed hard, fingers curling into fists at his sides. The colonel looked like he wanted the mic back, like he wanted to smooth this into something safer. But Ethan beat him to it. He turned toward the formation and raised his voice. "Battalion, listen up," he called, and the speakers carried his words across the concrete. "You just heard how a legend started, with a man finally refusing to stay quiet. So hear this from me now. If you see something in my plan that looks like it will get us killed, you say it. I don't care if I outrank you. Say it in rehearsal. Say it in the motor pool. Say it in the talk. I'll take the heat with you." His heart pounded, but he didn't stop. "And if you ever watch me stay silent when I shouldn't, you remember this moment and know I failed you." For a breathless second, nobody moved. Then the colonel did something Ethan hadn't expected. He faced Rourke, brought his hand up, and gave a sharp, formal salute. The sergeant major followed. One by one, officers and NCOs and then whole platoons raised their hands until the entire field was a forest of salutes aimed not at the reviewing stand, but at the old man in the red flannel shirt who had just torn open their favorite war story and left the hard part beating in the air. Rourke stared at them, jaw working, eyes suddenly bright. He returned the salute, slow, deliberate, perfect, then leaned closer to Ethan so only he could hear over the speakers clicking off. "They called me Hammer 6, he murmured. "You don't need a call sign, son. You need a spine." Ethan's throat tightened. "Yes, sir," he managed. The colonel dismissed the battalion, and the formation dissolved into buzzing clusters, everyone talking louder than usual, processing what they'd just heard. Ethan stayed beside the old man. "Mr. Rourke," he said quietly, "if you're willing, I'd like you to come to the motor pool. No microphones, no cameras, just my officers, my NCOs, and the truth you just dropped on us." Rourke gave a tired half-smile that carried more weight than any medal. "You got coffee that doesn't taste like mop water?" he asked. Ethan actually laughed. "I'll brew it myself." They walked off the parade ground together, between lines of steel and soldiers, and as Ethan matched his pace to the veteran's uneven steps, he realized that whatever people called him on the radio from now on, the only thing that mattered was whether, when the next bad plan slid across a map, he chose quiet comfort, or the hard, loud path that had once made strangers call an old man Hammer 6.